Welcome back to another lesson. In this lesson, I'm going to be answering a question from one of the students in the mastery course. He asked if it's possible, it would be great to have a lesson more focused on identifying market structure in PineScript. This is a really tricky subject to get into when working with code in any language because there is so much subjectivity involved in identifying things like market structure. It's not obvious to a script. To the human eye, especially the trained human eye who's been trading for a while, recognizing these patterns in price action is extremely intuitive and easy. But in code, because we need to tell the computer exactly what it is we are looking for, it gets very, very tricky. But I will do my best to answer these questions. As you'll see, when you set out to try to do this on your own, it's going to be incredibly difficult to get your script to see the market the way you see it. I would go so far as to say it's impossible to 100% accurately transfer your human eye and discretion into code in any programming language, not just Pine. But anyway, continuing with the question, he asks how to identify levels of support and resistance, but also pivot points, so swing high and lows of impulsive moves, and accumulation and distribution zones or blocks of price activity, aka consolidation. And he's got a screenshot here of some boxes around price action, which looks like consolidation to me. Now, this is a Heiken Ashi chart. PineScript does not work very well with alternative candle types. It can be done, but it's not ideal, especially if you're working with the security function. It doesn't work at all. So for today's lesson, I'm going to be just using a regular candlestick price chart, but it shouldn't really matter that much for this lesson. So I'm going to answer all three of these questions, but not in the one video because it will take quite a bit of time to go over each subject here. So for today's lesson, we're going to focus on consolidation, how to identify consolidation. As I just mentioned, this is extremely difficult to achieve in PineScript, but I'll show you a solution that I came up with today. And this is the best solution I could think of to come as close as possible to identifying periods of consolidation. So let's jump over into the Pine editor and get started. All right, so here I am with my script on my chart. As you can see, it's not perfect, but it does a half decent job of identifying periods of consolidation. Now, the problem we have here with identifying consolidation in code is what look-back period do you input into the script? Is this consolidation? Or did this move break structure and now this is the consolidation? Or if we zoom out our chart completely, was this whole period consolidation? So you're starting to get the idea. There is the matter of perspective that influences what you perceive as consolidation in the markets. But anyway, with that disclaimer aside, let's jump into the code here and have a look at how I created this solution for identifying consolidation in the markets. So I've already written the script, obviously, so I'm just going to walk you through the code block by block and explain what I'm doing. First of all, I'm just getting some user inputs here, which we'll cover in a moment when we get down to the bulk of the script logic. But before we get started, we need to declare a bunch of variables. First, we declare some variables for tracking the bar indexes of key price points. So when we're drawing a box around price action, the box needs a start index, which is a bar index, a bar number. And it also needs price points. So it needs a start index and an end index and a high and a low price. And so these variables here, these first three, track the high index, so the bar index of the highest high, the low index, so the bar index of the lowest low over our look-back period, and the start index is the start index of our box that is drawing onto the chart. And then here is our box variable here. All of these are persistent variables. They're all VAR variables. And we have our consolidation box, which is set to NA by default. And then we override that later on once we have our conditions met for determining whether price is currently consolidating or not. Next up, we have another section of variables here. This prepares our highest high and lowest low. That's what HH and LL is short for. And before we continue, I can delete these two counters here because I don't actually use them in the script. I was using them for testing purposes with a different idea. So these are the three variables we need to track our highest high, our lowest low, and the bars since the last update. So the last time we updated our highest high or our lowest low, that is this bars since update counter here. So first we check if the current bar is higher than the current bar's high is higher than our saved highest high, or highest high is NA. If either of these conditions are met, then we save the highest high into our highest high variable. We save the bar index of the current bar as well, and we reset our start index to NA. Now remember, start index is the starting index of our box. When we create our box, which I'll get to soon, if we set it to NA, then the box will just stop drawing. So every time a new high is detected or a new low is detected over our lookback period, our box start index gets reset as well. And then what we're waiting for is X amount of bars to print between the high and low before we start drawing our box. But we'll get to that in a moment. The next thing we do is we check the same for our highest high, but for our lowest low. So if the current bar's low is less than our saved lowest low, or lowest low is NA, then we save our low and our low bar index and reset our start index. And if neither of these conditions are met, then that means we haven't made a highest high, we haven't made a lowest low, and so we increment our bars since update. So if this bar is neither a new high nor a new low, update the bars since update counter. Next, in this if statement here, this is where we check if we've exceeded our lookback period and we haven't updated our highest high, then we force update it to the current high. So if our bars since update counter is greater than or equal to our lookback period from the settings menu, which is 50 bars by default, and the bars that have printed onto our chart since the high was equal to our highest high. So this is essentially saying if the bars since update is greater than our lookback and the bars that have printed since we had our highest high is greater than or equal to our lookback, then we reset our highest high value to the current bar's high. And then we do the same thing for our low. And I'll show you why I included these if statements. If I comment these out and bring the editor down a bit and save my code, watch what happens to our zones. They're gone. If I jump to the very start of our chart, none of them are drawing here. So these two little if statements in here make sure that our zones get reset if we exceed our lookback period. So if I uncomment just this one here and save my code, and I turn on draw high and low, now you can see that what the script is doing is saving the lowest low in price action, and it never actually resets it. So this is as low as price went on this time frame on my chart, and the low never gets updated again. But by including this little if statement here, it checks if the bars that are printed since our last lowest low update exceeds our lookback, and we haven't had a new lowest low update recently, then we just reset our lowest low. And that makes sure that if a lot of bars print, so if I zoom in here is a good example. So this was our lowest low over the past 50 bars at this point. And then if I count how many bars I've plotted here, once we get to the 50th bar, because our lowest low hasn't updated with price action, we force it to update to the recent low. And that ensures that our zones continuously update. Now, another thing we could do here is set this to ta.lowestLow over the past 10 bars, maybe, for example. And I need to extract that from the scope. So let's create a new variable here called recent low and paste that in there. And now that should compile without any warnings. There we go. And maybe that's just a little bit better than simply forcing it to the current bar's low. I'll do the same thing for our high here. So I'll create a new variable called recent high, which is set to the ta.highest high over the past 10 bars. And I'll paste that in there. That might make a little bit more sense for this particular script. All right, so next up, we check if we are trading between our highest high and lowest low, then update our consolidation counter on each progressing bar. So here's our consolidation counter. It's a persistent variable. And if the highest high on the current bar, the saved highest high on the current bar is equal to the highest high that was saved on the previous bar, and the lowest low on the current bar is equal to the lowest low on the previous bar. So let me show you what that means. If this high value, this red line, and this blue line are equal to the previous bar's blue and red line, meaning we have a straight line printing here on both, then we count how many bars have printed while that condition was true. And what we're essentially doing here is counting how many bars have printed since we made our highest high and lowest low. And once we get X amount of bars printing between these two price values, then we have confirmed that there is potential consolidation happening. That's what this consolidation counter is used for. And if I open up the settings menu, if this many bars prints between our highest high and lowest low value, then we start drawing our box. But we'll get to that in a moment. The else statement here just checks. Otherwise, if we have created a new highest high or lowest low, meaning that the current bars highest high is not equal to the previous bar's highest high, then we reset our consolidation counter, we reset our start index, and we delete our consolidation box. We set it to NA. And that allows us to use this code here to plot our consolidation box when our conditions are met. So this if statement here says, if the amount of bars that have printed during consolidation exceeds our limit, save the start index for our box. So if consolidation counter is greater than or equal to consolidation count, this number here, then we assign, or start index becomes, and then we have a little ternary operator here that checks, is start index NA? If so, then we check, is the high index, the highest high index, greater than the lowest low index, meaning was the highest high made after the lowest low? If it was, then we use the high index as the starting point for our box. Otherwise, if the high occurred first and then the low, then we use the low as our start index, which is what happens right here. You can see that the high is the same all the way across here, but we print a new low. And then as soon as we get 10 bars printing between these two price points, then we draw a box starting from the bar index of the low and ending on the current bar index. And then once a new high is made, we stop drawing our box. And if start index is not NA, then we just leave it set to start index. So we don't override it with this ternary operator here. It's already been assigned to one of these values, and so we just leave it alone, leave it set to whatever it's currently set to. But if it is NA, then we decide which index to use to start drawing our box from. And then finally, this if statement here checks if start index is not NA, and the distance between the high and low is not huge compared to the ATR value, then draw a box. So that's what the ATR validation setting is for. If the price distance from our high down to our low is greater than, by default, it's set to 5 times the ATR, then we don't draw the box. This is to stop the script from drawing massive zones that won't really be consolidation, even though the high and the low might be the same across multiple bars. If the range is too large, it's unlikely to be consolidation. So that's what this little check here is for. So this if statement says, if the start index is not NA and the distance from the highest high to the lowest low is less than or equal to the current ATR multiplied by 5 by default, then we check if our consolidation box is NA, then we create a new box. We use the box.new function and we create a box with the start index, the highest high price, the ending index of the current bar on our chart, and the lowest low price. So start index, highest high, ending index, and then lowest low price. That gives us our box around consolidation, around the price that we want to highlight. Then I just set the background color to red with 80% transparency and the border color to red as well. And then we have this else statement here that says, if consolidation box is not NA, that means that it's actually on the chart already. And what we need to do instead of creating a new box is update an existing box. And that's what this code here does. It updates the box.setRight, so the right index of our consolidation box to the current bar index. So if I scroll through my charts and try and find a market that is currently in consolidation, here we go, perfect example. If I zoom in on this chart, when this bar closes and a new bar begins printing, because this box is current and it is actually currently being drawn, when the new bar starts drawing, this code here will detect that start index is not NA, so we do have a box that is actually being drawn onto our chart right now, and consolidation box is not NA, so this else statement will get executed. And instead of creating a new box that would overlap this box, it simply updates the existing box. So it will just move the ending index of this box to the current bar index. And then finally, we draw our highs and lows, but only if the user has turned on this option here. So if I turn that off, it gets rid of all the ugly lines, but we still have our consolidation boxes drawing onto the chart. Now, this is obviously not a perfect solution, but it's the best solution I could think of. And it's quite simple code, really. It's a little bit convoluted just because of the nature of tracking bar indexes of conditions that happened in the past. That is a little bit tricky to wrap your head around, especially if you're not super experienced with PineScript. But this is a great example of how you can go about doing that. And yeah, I hope you found this lesson interesting. It's quite an interesting concept. To be honest with you, to be perfectly honest, this script took me a lot longer to create than it should have. I've spent the last 4 hours nearly working on trying to figure out how to do this. And this is the best solution I can currently think of for achieving this. Now, the reason I say it's not the perfect solution is because it does depend a lot on how you set up your look-back periods and your consolidation count. The ATR validation will affect it too, but these two especially will affect all kinds of things. So if I set this to 20, for example, now you can see the zones change completely. And depending on what settings you use here, that will affect the accuracy of the script quite dramatically. But anyway, I'll wrap up this lesson here as I've spent a lot longer on this than I should have today as it is. But thanks for the question. I'll address the other questions in the next lessons to come. I'll cover how I detect support and resistance in the markets and how you can detect pivot points in the markets as well, or impulsive moves. I've already briefly touched on that in the auto fib lesson, where I broke down the inbuilt TradingView auto Fibonacci tool. You can see that this tool detects pivot points in the markets. I've created a script here, pivot points, if I turn that on. I've created a script that does exactly the same thing basically, but stripped out all of the Fibonacci code, and it basically just detects impulsive moves in the market. But I'll cover that in the next lesson. For now, let's have a look at what happens when this counter reaches 0. There we go. See our box has updated to include the current bar. That's this little else statement here at work. Anyway, that'll do it for this lesson. Hope you found it interesting. As always, best of luck with your trading, and I'll speak with you in the next one. Take care.